Lots of our customers ask us questions around gifted deposits, especially first-time buyers. So today we just wanted to talk to you all about gifted deposits, so you know exactly where you stand purchasing a property with a gifted deposit. Hello, welcome back to our channel and podcast. My name's Gemma, and here at WS we talk about all things relating to money, mortgages and positive money mindset. So if that interests you, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the thumbs up. It really helps with our YouTube algorithm and means that you won't miss out on any of our videos. On today's episode of Let's Talk Money and Mortgages, we have Iftika joining us here again. And for those of you who don't know Ifti is a trained accountant and mortgage advisor who has been in the industry for over 10 years, and he is also one of the founding directors here at WIS. Welcome back, Ifti.
Hi, thank you very much. How are you doing, Gemma?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you very much.
So this is one of your favourite things to talk about, isn't it? You like gifted deposits. Yeah. Lots of questions come in around gifted deposits.
Yeah, I mean, I see this quite a lot with first-time buyers for sure. But obviously, there are others, who are home movers as well, who ask this question quite regularly. So yeah, it's a very popular question for sure.
All right, so getting straight into it then, what is a gifted deposit for those people that don't know?
Okay, quite often, not always, but quite often this is associated with mom and dad's bank, right? Often, parents gift money to their children to help them buy their first property or help them with the house move if they're moving to a new property. And often the banks say, you need a letter for that, right? So that's kind of what the gifted deposit is. Quite a lot of banks who accept a gifted deposit from family, and this is what it is, right? So quite often, like I said, it's parents, but at times there are siblings who help each other as well, right? So this is what the gifted deposit is all about.
So can anybody help with a gift? Can you get a gifted deposit from like a friend, or like will the bank accept that?
Okay, so the answer to that is probably not, right? So usually gifted deposit has to come from family. And when I say family, close family. Banks are generally happy with parents or siblings, right? But if it's something like a cousin or a distant relative, not all banks will like it. So we need to have a conversation with the banks and get them to agree before we make an application. Friends are pretty unlikely that the banks will accept, because obviously banks categorize, even if it's a gift from a friend, as a sort of a loan, right? Because most of the time that's the arrangement that takes place in the back end sort of thing, right? So therefore banks are not comfortable with that. So if you have something unusual like that, you probably want to speak to an advisor, or obviously if you're dealing with a bank directly, you probably want to check with the bank on that. But advisors generally work with a lot of banks, and they will know what banks are happy with what.
Yeah, okay. So will all lenders then accept gifted deposits? How does it work?
No is the answer. Some lenders won't, but the majority of the lenders will accept a gifted deposit. At least the main high street lenders, most of them do. But this is something you definitely want to check with an advisor before you make an application. Because the last thing you want is go and find a property and, make an offer being accepted, and realize that, the gifted deposit doesn't work for you, right? So you want to check that before you make an application for sure.
It's important, isn't it, to sort of let the advisor know, if you're using an advisor, that you plan on using a gifted deposit so that they can do the relevant checks for you.
That's right. Yeah. So you probably want to do that for sure. But also some banks, they have alternatives as well, right? But sometimes they say, okay, forget the gifted deposit. We can work on schemes like joint borrower sole proprietary application. Those sort of schemes are also out there. But some banks will say, okay, you can use that, but instead of this, right? So that may still work for some people. Sometimes it might even work better, right? So don't restrict yourself to this option. That's why I said it's always best to get advice. And again, these joint borrower single proprietary applications are not accepted by all banks as well, right? So there are only a handful of banks who do that. So those options are out there. Generally, when you speak to advisors, they will try to compare all these before they make a recommendation to you.
Okay, so another little thing. What about cash? Will they accept cash as a gifted deposit?
That's a big question. This is a common question as well. People ask me. Generally, cash is not accepted as a gifted deposit. What I like to tell people is, I always say this, right? It's not a question of just satisfying a bank. Cash is mainly to do with some of the money laundering regulations. So you have to satisfy your advisor, your mortgage broker, that it's a genuine transaction and the funds are genuinely sort of earned, right? and then you got to satisfy the bank, and then you got to satisfy the solicitors as well, right? So all three of them will do independent checks on this area. So if there is cash, because I know some people have cash at home, right? And when the children want to sort of buy a house, they say, okay, here's my cash, you can have it, right? But that doesn't quite work, right? Because a lot of banks don't like it. And like I said, forget the banks, even solicitors may not like it, your advisor might not like it, right? So if somebody asks me, I wouldn't like it either, right? So it's not something that is generally accepted out there. So if somebody has a cash, it won't really work as your deposit, right? It has to be genuinely earned money. So you need to be able to prove that to the bank, right? So from whoever who is giving you the money.
Okay, cool. So what about overseas? If your parents live abroad or something, can the deposit come from overseas?
Yeah, good news is yes is the answer, but there's a small catch there. There's always a catch, right? Unfortunately, some of the countries, they fall onto a sanctioned list, right? So you just need to make sure that you're not part of that sanctioned list country, right? So if there is, obviously, the banks wouldn't like it. Obviously, solicitors will look at the same thing. And like I said, the advisors will look at the same thing as well, right? So if you're in that sanction list, we may have a bit of a problem. Otherwise, yes, you can get deposits from abroad as well, but you need to follow an audit trail. That's the most important thing, right? So we have to make sure that the audit trail is there to prove to the bank.
And for those people who don't know what an audit trail is, what's that?
Okay. The audit trail shows how the money got to your bank account. That's kind of what it is in the simplest way, but I'll explain it to you, right? So for example, let's say Bank of Mom and Dad pays you this money, right? So Mom and Dad lives abroad, just taking that as an example. Mom and Dad has, say, £10,000, which they want to give to the child, right, as a gift. So the bank will want to know how Mom and Dad saved up that £10,000 to give it to the child, right? So they will look at things like, the parents' bank statements for 6 months, maybe, right, to see how that money was. Like some people have things like fixed deposits. Some people have just saved money over a period of time. Those should be straightforward. But if you have unusual transactions, like parents borrowed the money and given the child, banks might not like that, right? So you just need to show how that money was built up in the parents' account, and they'll want to see that money leave the bank account from that particular country, and that same amount lands in your bank account. Obviously, there'll be exchange differences, but apart from that, they'll want to see that same thing land in your bank account. That's how it works, right? Again, I'm looking at the other extreme. Let's say parents have cash abroad and they send it to you and you deposit it in your account. It wouldn't quite work the same because there's no audit trail, right? It doesn't show how that cash was built up, right? So that's what banks will want to see. And that's what advisors and solicitors will want to see as well, right? So you need to make sure that you show how that money reached your bank account. So that's what it means.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned solicitors there. So it's not necessarily just the advisor that wants to see this information, is it? Sometimes the solicitor wants to know more as well.
Oh, solicitor has to, because they also have to comply with the money laundering regulations. Banks have to, advisors have to as well. So all three of us will ask the same question, right? So you just need to make sure that you can satisfy this.
And you mentioned before about having sort of a letter that explained the situation, where the money came from, maybe bank statements to back it up. But I just wanted to go back to the letter. Is there anything specific that you need to mention on the letter?
Yes. You have to be careful with the letter. We have a format. I think we can share that. We can put it at the bottom here so that people can have a look at it. But in the letter, you'll have to mention that it's a gift from the family or whoever it is donating it. And then it'll have to say that the person giving the money has no rights to the property whatsoever. We'll have to be very clear that this is not a loan, right? So long as you can mention that in the letter, I think most banks will accept it. Like I said, we will put a standard template, but the requirement from bank to bank may vary. So we may have to edit this letter from time to time, depending on where you are going to get your mortgage from. But so those are mainly what they are looking for.
Great. All right. So any final notes, anything else you can think of, Ifti, that people might want to know about gifted deposit?
Yeah. So gifted deposit, obviously it's a sort of a good way to help you. But like I said, there are other ways that a family can help you as well, right? Like I mentioned earlier, a joint borrower's sole proprietor application might be an option. And there are other options out there, like a guarantor mortgage as well. I mean, at the moment, there aren't too many guarantor mortgages, but there is an option still out there. So those things are also available for yourself, right? Like I say, it's always best to get advice on these areas, because sometimes you just look at one option, not knowing that there are other options available for you, right? So that's why I think it's always best to speak to an advisor on this area.
Yeah, thanks, Ifti. I was just going to say a reminder that these points may or may not be applicable to everybody. So if you're unsure if they are suitable for you, then please do talk to an advisor. And I will leave our WS contact details below just so that you can contact us, as we're always more than happy to help. And a little reminder that as a mortgage is secured against your home or property, it may be repossessed if you do not keep up with the mortgage repayments. Thanks, Ifti, for some more great advice. We'll be back next week, guys, with another episode of Let's Talk Money and Mortgages. Have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.